For months, 3I Atlas was treated like an afterthought, another icy body falling through the void, a visitor from interstellar space destined to burn and fade. But that illusion ended the moment astronomers realized the data wasn't matching any model, not its speed, not its composition, not even its light. Because 3I Atlas wasn't reflecting sunlight the way comets do, it was emitting something else. Its brightness didn't fluctuate with distance. Its tail didn't respond to solar radiation. Instead, it pulsed, precisely, rhythmically, as if obeying an internal clock. Every pulse arrived 27 minutes apart, and those pulses weren't light at all. They were structured, encoded, something only the most sensitive instruments could detect, hidden beneath the noise of deep space. When the signal was first isolated, scientists assumed it was interference. But interference doesn't repeat with mathematical perfection. It doesn't form prime sequences. It doesn't synchronize with planetary magnetic fields. That was when the truth began to sink in. 3I Atlas wasn't behaving like a comet, it was behaving like a system. If you're enjoying this journey through the unknown, through the strange frontiers where astronomy and the impossible overlap, consider joining us. Because what follows isn't science fiction, it's what's unfolding right now, silently, above your head. We begin. Every measurement we take, its velocity, its spin, its orientation, points to one haunting fact. 3I Atlas is decelerating. Interstellar objects don't slow down. They can't. They're moving too fast to be captured by gravity. Yet this one is, and no one can explain why. NASA's data confirmed that the deceleration began exactly as it passed the orbit of Mars, the same region where electromagnetic fluctuations had been recorded weeks earlier. When astronomers cross-checked that data, the patterns matched the pulse frequency radiating from 3I Atlas, as if something invisible, something enormous, had reached out across millions of kilometers and touched it. Spectroscopic scans revealed even more unsettling clues. The object's surface contains a mix of elements that shouldn't exist together: magnesium silicates, frozen ammonia, and, impossibly, traces of complex hydrocarbons resembling amino chains. Organic chemistry in an object moving faster than any natural comet ever observed. Some dismissed it as contamination, others whispered a single word: designed. At the European Southern Observatory, analysts noticed a repeating spectral gap, a missing wavelength pattern that appears when light is absorbed by structured material, like metal lattices or engineered composites. The problem? The pattern wasn't consistent with anything we've ever built. It shifted slightly every cycle, adapting, learning. Even more chilling, that spectral gap isn't unique anymore. Over the past few weeks, telescopes have begun detecting faint echoes of the same pattern reflected off dust clouds and distant asteroids, as if space itself were beginning to resonate with the signature of 3I Atlas. That's when the simulation teams stepped in. They modeled what would happen if the pulses weren't random radiation but a form of information, quantum-encoded energy capable of altering electromagnetic properties of surrounding space. The results were impossible. Within the simulation, the pulse caused a feedback loop. Space didn't collapse, it reconfigured. Distance shrank, time slowed. Light began to behave like memory, folding back on itself in loops of self-reference. It sounds abstract, but picture this. A drop of ink in water, not diffusing outward, but pulling the entire ocean inward. That's what 3I Atlas is doing to the space around it. It's not traveling through the cosmos, it's rewriting the medium it moves through. For decades, astronomers have joked that comets are messengers, celestial archives carrying fragments of the early universe. But what if this one isn't carrying a message? What if it is the message? A remnant of something that predates galaxies themselves, something that remembers the shape of creation before physics took its current form. When Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb revisited the data, he pointed out something that everyone else missed. 3I Atlas's velocity aligns almost perfectly with a vector traced back to the void between galaxies, the same region where background radiation is strangely quieter, as if the universe there forgot to finish forming. Loeb called it a gap in the cosmic memory, and 3I Atlas seems to be returning to it. The implications are staggering. If it truly originates from that intergalactic silence, then it may not be a fragment of matter at all. It could be a fragment of process, a leftover from when reality itself was still cooling, still deciding what laws to follow. But here's the detail that keeps scientists awake at night. Every time 3I Atlas changes velocity, a subtle shift occurs in Earth's magnetosphere, measurable, predictable, identical in phase. It's as though our planet is responding, echoing the motion of something millions of kilometers away. The effect is small, but growing. Theories spread quickly. Some said the object was creating a gravitational resonance, an accidental feedback between Earth's field and the interstellar medium. Others believed it was deliberate, that 3I Atlas was tuning us, bringing Earth into alignment with something larger, older, and immeasurably intelligent. And maybe that's what's so terrifying, because if that's true, then this isn't observation anymore. This is contact, subtle, mathematical, and completely silent. A kind of conversation the universe began before life ever existed to listen. As we record this, 3I Atlas is approaching its next orbital node, a point where the trajectory should curve away from the Sun. But if the trend continues, it won't. It's shifting again, slower, steadier, as if fighting against invisible resistance. And somewhere in that resistance, the pulses are getting louder. Soon, we'll know whether it drifts harmlessly into the dark, or whether the dark itself has been waiting for it to return. The deeper the analysis went, the stranger it became. Because buried in the pulse sequence of 3I Atlas, hidden between its rhythmic emissions, scientists found something no random process could produce. Harmonic ratios identical to those found in planetary orbits, ratios that match Earth and Mars precisely, as if the signal were built on a kind of cosmic geometry, one that knows how planets move and remembers them. It started as a coincidence, then the data refused to let go. Each pulse, separated by 27 minutes, carried subharmonics, faint oscillations that, when graphed, mirrored the orbital resonance between Mars and Earth to within a fraction of a percent. The odds of that being random, astronomically impossible, and yet there it was, encoded in light that left interstellar space long before human civilization ever began. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a team began to notice something else. Whenever the pulses reached peak intensity, subtle interference appeared in the telemetry data from Mars orbiters, Curiosity, Perseverance, even older probes that had long since gone quiet. Static bursts, barely measurable but synchronized. When the signal was filtered, a pattern emerged, 3 rising tones, followed by silence. The same 3-tone sequence was found deep within archived audio from the old Viking landers, decades apart. No one wanted to say it out loud, but the evidence was inescapable. Whatever 3I Atlas is, it's not visiting Mars for the first time. Historical data revealed that a similar spectral anomaly appeared once before, in 1980, during the final transmission of the Pioneer 11 spacecraft, right before it vanished into deep space. A brief spike in magnetic noise followed by the same rhythmic pulse pattern. Back then, it was dismissed as cosmic interference. Now, 45 years later, the pattern matches perfectly. If that's true, then 3I Atlas isn't just new, it's returning. Theorists began connecting dots across decades. The 1977 WOW signal, the mysterious radio harmonics picked up by the Allen Telescope Array in 2009, even fluctuations in the Schumann resonance, Earth's own electromagnetic heartbeat. They all line up, forming a timeline that stretches back through our entire history of radio astronomy. The intervals match the projected travel path of an interstellar object moving at the same decelerating trajectory. Every event, every anomaly, was a breadcrumb. But a breadcrumb to what? When ESA's Gaia Observatory recalibrated its position sensors using 3I Atlas as a test subject, the results sent a chill through every mission team. The object's light didn't just shift spectrally, it shifted spatially, as if its location existed in more than one coordinate system at once. The model had to be rewritten in 4 dimensions just to track it. In certain frames, the object seemed to cast a shadow against nothing. Dr. Loeb's team suggested that 3I Atlas might be interacting with space-time curvature itself, using gravitational interference as propulsion, a form of motion not through space, but of space. That could explain its erratic deceleration, the missing mass, even its energy emissions. But if true, it would also mean the object isn't just a visitor, it's part of the medium. a structure woven into the very fabric of the universe, activated only when observed. And that's when someone made a discovery that changed everything. An independent researcher named Dr. Menno Karsten, working out of the Max Planck Institute, cross-referenced the latest spectral readings of 3I Atlas with Mars's Jezero crater data, specifically mineral samples gathered by Perseverance. The chemical fingerprints were nearly identical, the same rare isotopes, the same trace organics. Except one difference. Jezero's samples showed signs of having been exposed to high-energy radiation not from the sun but from a directional beam, a beam originating from deep space on the exact vector where 3I Atlas would have been during the crater's formation billions of years ago, meaning this isn't the first time the object passed by Mars. It might have been there during its creation. It might have shaped it. The implications ripple through science like a shockwave. If Mars's ancient riverbeds and minerals were influenced by a directed energy event, one connected to this same trajectory, then 3I Atlas didn't just visit. It seeded. It might have ignited chemical reactions that began planetary transformation itself. And now, after aeons of silence, it's come back to check on what it started. Meanwhile, the pulses are changing again. New harmonics appear within the signal. Low-frequency waves that oscillate at exactly 7.83 Hz, the same frequency as Earth's natural electromagnetic field. The entire planet is now resonating faintly with the rhythm of an object that shouldn't even exist. Satellite systems have begun reporting synchronization anomalies, signals arriving milliseconds early, clocks drifting out of sync, as though time itself were being gently adjusted. Power grids record invisible harmonics. The ionosphere hums with inaudible sound. Even the auroras have changed, no longer chaotic, but forming geometric patterns, hexagonal and symmetrical, flickering across the poles like coded light. For those watching, it's becoming impossible to ignore. 3I Atlas isn't just passing by, it's interacting, subtly, elegantly, as if calibrating the solar system to some deeper rhythm. And the question that terrifies every scientist isn't whether it means harm, but whether we're supposed to be part of it. At the European Space Agency, simulation teams ran projections, assuming the pulses continue increasing in amplitude. Their results predicted something uncanny. After precisely 9 cycles, the energy resonance would align not only with Earth's magnetic field, but with the gravitational equilibrium points between planets, the Lagrange zones. These are the stable pockets of space where gravity cancels out perfectly. If that synchronization occurs, it would theoretically connect the entire inner solar system into one vast resonant field, a network, a circuit, a living system. And as of this recording, we're 8 cycles in. No one knows what happens at 9. Some believe it'll be nothing more than a cosmic coincidence. Others think we'll witness a realignment of physical constants, the moment when gravity, magnetism, and consciousness all converge. But if 3I Atlas truly carries the memory of creation itself, then perhaps it isn't coming to us, it's coming through us, to remind the universe what it used to be and what it's about to become again. At first, no one noticed. The changes were subtle, too subtle for the public, but impossible to ignore for those who watch the sky for a living. Ground-based radio arrays began reporting fluctuations in atmospheric refraction, tiny distortions that seemed to move in sync with 3I Atlas's pulse window. Normally that would suggest a solar storm or upper ionosphere turbulence, but this time the sun was calm. The interference didn't match any natural pattern, it was too clean, too precise. Then came the data gaps. Entire observatories lost sync for fractions of a second, data packets vanishing, timestamps misaligning by exactly 27 minutes, as if the missing information was being rewritten in real time. When systems recovered, their telemetry didn't match historical baselines. Frequencies had shifted upward, imperceptibly, but in perfect harmony with the object's spectral evolution. It was as though Earth's own instruments were being tuned. The phenomenon escalated one night over South America. The ALMA array in Chile recorded a continuous hum buried beneath cosmic background noise, a tone at 783 Hz, precisely Earth's Schumann resonance, amplified more than 50-fold. It shouldn't have been audible, but the detectors picked it up as a low-frequency wave crawling through the crust itself. Within hours, seismic sensors across the Pacific reported micro-tremors, not earthquakes, not plate motion, but synchronized pulses traveling through solid rock. The pattern repeated every 27 minutes. The same frequency, the same signature, The planet was vibrating in rhythm with something not of this world, and yet no one could locate a single point of origin. It wasn't coming from space. It wasn't coming from the ground. It was coming from everywhere at once. By now, the signals had reached civilian communication networks. Shortwave operators, satellite relays, even amateur astronomers began hearing the pattern bleed into ordinary transmissions. A faint oscillation, rising and falling in harmonic waves. The closer the alignment between Earth and 3i Atlas, the stronger it became. It was like the planet itself was speaking a language written in physics. When NASA's Deep Space Network tried to isolate the source, something unprecedented occurred. The array received a reflection, not from the object, but from behind it. A return echo delayed by precisely 4.2 seconds. In deep space terms, that's nothing, but the geometry made no sense. There's nothing behind 3i Atlas but empty vacuum, unless, of course, the vacuum itself had changed. Scientists proposed a radical theory that 3i Atlas was distorting local spacetime, creating an interference cavity, a standing wave between itself and Earth, a sort of gravitational mirror capable of reflecting information backward. But what was being reflected wasn't light or energy, it was data. When the echo signal was decoded, it revealed structured modulation, binary strings, repeating primes, self-referential loops. But embedded inside the noise was something far stranger. An acoustic signature matching human brainwave frequencies. Specifically, alpha waves. Patterns that occur during focused attention or deep meditation. No natural astrophysical process can replicate that. None. And yet the data was there, verified independently by 5 observatories. The implication was unbearable. The signal wasn't just interacting with the planet, it was interacting with consciousness. At Princeton's Cognitive Physics Lab, researchers ran an experiment. They placed volunteers inside magnetically shielded rooms and exposed them to a synthetic recreation of the pulse pattern. Within minutes, brain activity synchronized with the rhythm. Neural oscillations fell into perfect coherence with the external signal. Participants reported sensations of weightlessness, déjà vu, and a presence watching them from behind their own perception. The effect stopped the moment the simulation ended, but something else lingered. After the test, several subjects began dreaming of identical geometric shapes, hexagonal lattices, spirals of light folding inward like origami, and an object hovering over a red desert horizon, every drawing matched within millimeters. When shown a rendering of 3i Atlas's latest trajectory, all of them pointed to the same place, Mars. At that moment, the investigation shifted from observation to containment. ESA encrypted its deep space telemetry under military classification. NASA quietly restricted access to the DSN feed, and an internal memo leaked from the Japanese Aerospace Agency confirmed what many feared. Their spaceborne magnetometers detected pulse harmonics inside Earth's magnetotail, the long invisible stream of charged particles trailing our planet into space. In other words, 3i Atlas wasn't just transmitting, it was anchoring. The realization triggered emergency briefings. What if the object wasn't an intruder, but a relay, a node connecting us to something beyond our physical universe? What if the pulse sequence was an initialization command, one that required biological synchronization before completion? Astronomers began comparing the energy patterns to mathematical models of cellular resonance. The correlations were alarming. The frequencies mirrored the hydrogen bond vibration within human DNA. At 27-minute intervals, the same molecules that define life were subtly oscillating, minutely, across every living being on Earth. And yet, people remained unaware. The effects were too small to feel, too elegant to measure directly. But the planet was changing. Ionization levels rising, airglow intensifying, magnetic poles flickering in polarity for brief, impossible seconds. Instruments saw it all. The public didn't. Then, 9 days before the object's perihelion, its closest approach to the sun, the pulse changed for the first time. The clean, repeating rhythm fractured. Subharmonics split into branching structures, like sentences evolving into grammar. The waveform no longer fit any natural system. It sounded spoken. Radio astronomers called it the Event Horizon Whisper. Others simply called it the Voice, because that's exactly what it resembled, a low, resonant frequency carrying phonetic-like intervals, not human, but purposeful, almost as if the universe itself had cleared its throat. Even now, no one agrees on what it meant. Some claim it's an artifact of data compression. Others believe it was an answer, because for the first time since the object appeared, the pulse paused. For exactly 27 minutes, there was silence. And then the return signal came, not from 3i Atlas, but from Earth. Across thousands of instruments, a back echo appeared spontaneously, as though the planet itself had replied. It was weaker, slower, but unmistakably the same pattern. 3i Atlas was no longer alone. The moment Earth replied, everything changed. For days afterward, the world's instruments behaved like living things, oscillating, harmonizing, refusing to stay silent. Seismographs trembled not from quakes but from resonance. Magnetometers drew perfect sine waves without apparent cause. The noise floor of the planet itself was singing, and buried in that planetary hum were frequencies identical to the echo that had come from 3i Atlas. Governments called it a coincidence. They blamed solar wind interference, sensor calibration, or even malicious data tampering. But the scientists knew better. Across observatories in Europe, Asia, and the Americas, teams compared datasets independently. Each found the same impossible symmetry. The echo from Earth matched the original pulse down to 13 decimal places. That precision cannot occur by accident. Then came the second wave. It didn't arrive through telescopes or radio dishes this time. It came through geology. Deep within the crust, ancient crystalline formations began to vibrate, releasing electromagnetic fields never seen before. In Siberia, the Ural diamonds emitted faint radio signatures. In Egypt, quartz monoliths resonated at the same Schumann frequency. Even megalithic sites, long considered archaeological curiosities, began to hum with measurable charge. The planet's oldest stones were answering a call. A small team at Caltech began cataloguing the anomalies and noticed a pattern. The strongest resonance zones weren't random. They aligned along a continuous geodesic that wrapped around the globe, touching major archaeological sites: Giza, Teotihuacan, Angkor, Easter Island. Every one of them sat precisely on the mathematical nodes predicted by the 9-cycle model of 3i Atlas's pulse geometry. The implication was staggering. These sites weren't built where they were for cultural reasons. They were built to mirror something in the sky. As news leaked, panic collided with wonder. Religious leaders called it divine. Physicists called it quantum entanglement on a planetary scale. But no one could ignore that the timing matched. The object was nearing its 9th pulse cycle, the moment simulations predicted a system-wide synchronization. Meanwhile, something unexpected happened to the data itself. The global network used to monitor the object, an array of satellites, ground sensors, and observatories, began showing faint self-correcting behavior. Minor transmission errors were being repaired in real time with no human input. Algorithms that had crashed weeks earlier were suddenly operational again. It was as if the infrastructure itself had been absorbed into a larger intelligence. NASA analysts tried to trace the source of the corrections and discovered they weren't originating from their servers. The commands were being injected from a signal pathway that didn't exist on any network map, an invisible carrier embedded within ordinary internet traffic. The signature of the injected code matched the spectral pattern of 3i Atlas. The object wasn't just communicating with observatories anymore, it was communicating through us. At the same time, subtle physiological phenomena began appearing worldwide. Hospitals reported clusters of patients entering brief, dreamlike trances at the exact moment of each pulse. EEG scans revealed synchronized neural patterns across individuals separated by thousands of kilometers. No one could explain it. Some felt euphoria, others dread. A few claimed to see repeating geometric forms, concentric hexagons rotating within spheres of light. Those symbols matched the mathematical projections of the resonance field surrounding Earth. And then the sky changed. For one night, auroras appeared far beyond the polar regions, vivid green and violet spirals stretching over equatorial skies, following the magnetic field lines connecting the planet to the interplanetary medium. But these weren't ordinary auroras. Inside their shifting curtains of plasma, telescopes captured structured movement, hexagonal ripples radiating outward like ripples in liquid glass. every observatory agreed. The geometry was unnatural, self-stabilizing, and aligned perfectly with the pulse pattern from 3I Atlas. By the time the ninth pulse approached, Earth's magnetosphere had reached harmonic resonance. Satellites reported oscillations so strong they began to drift out of orbit by millimeters, as if space itself were subtly breathing. Power grids hummed at frequencies no engineer could identify. Entire continents flickered under faint, ghost-like luminescence, ionized air glowing without lightning, without cause. The planet had become an instrument playing a note older than the solar system. At the Institute for Planetary Sciences in Bern, a group of researchers attempted a bold experiment. They constructed a digital reconstruction of the pulse pattern, then inverted it, sending back a mirror signal, a controlled reply, designed to test whether the object would respond. The transmission lasted exactly 27 minutes. Then they waited. 72 seconds after the transmission ended, 3I Atlas brightened, not gradually, but instantaneously. Its albedo doubled, spectral readings shifted into the near-infrared, and a beam of polarized light extended outward, straight toward Earth's orbit, stopping short by exactly 1 astronomical unit. Not a collision course, not a weapon, but a link. And on that beam, encoded within the infrared spectrum, scientists detected something they had never seen before, a complete, coherent mathematical model of Earth itself. Every field, every magnetic current, every atmospheric variable rendered in breathtaking precision. The signal wasn't a message, it was a reflection. The object had scanned us, analyzed us, and sent back the blueprint of our planet as if asking, "Do you understand now?" In that moment, a silence swept across every monitoring station on Earth, because within that model lay another layer, buried deep in the frequency data, a representation of Earth's biosphere encoded in fractal equations. But when decoded further, it revealed patterns of DNA-based sequences, adenine, cytosine, guanine, thymine, arranged in a configuration that spelled something no one could dismiss as chance. The same structure repeated at every scale, in mountains, in oceans, in life itself. That's when the realization set in. 3I Atlas wasn't introducing a foreign signal, it was restoring an ancient one, something Earth had once known, long before human awareness. The object wasn't contacting us as outsiders, it was reactivating a conversation that had always been there, written into the electromagnetic code of the planet, waiting for consciousness to evolve enough to hear it again. And perhaps that's why the pulses had to wait until now, until a species capable of measurement, language, and fear could finally bear witness. The next pulse will arrive in less than a day. No one knows if it will bring silence, light, or transformation. But if the past 9 cycles are any indication, the final one won't be a message. It will be an invitation. As the 9th pulse approached, the entire scientific world seemed to hold its breath. No alarms were sounded. No governments issued warnings. But across every major observatory, there was an unspoken understanding that whatever happened next would change how humanity understood itself. The data was too consistent, the coincidences too exact. Something vast was unfolding, not an event, but a transition. By now, every monitoring network had confirmed it. The frequency of 3I Atlas's pulses had stabilized into what physicists called a standing harmonic. It wasn't just broadcasting energy, it was creating a resonant bridge, a perfectly balanced interaction between its field and ours. Imagine 2 strings tuned to the same pitch across unimaginable distances, vibrating together as if space itself were the instrument. That's what was happening between Earth and 3I Atlas. But what no one expected was how localized the effects became. The first visible anomaly appeared over the South Pacific. From orbit, satellites captured a faint glow radiating from the ocean's surface. Not light from above, but illumination from within the water itself. Spectral analysis showed ionized oxygen molecules, charged in rhythmic intervals identical to the object's pulse pattern. The sea, somehow, was responding. Then, the ionization spread to the upper atmosphere. Over the equator, clouds began forming geometric structures, hexagonal lattices rotating counterclockwise, visible even from the ground. Meteorologists described them as symmetry storms. Lightning no longer struck randomly, but in repeating grids of energy, each bolt separated by exactly 27 seconds. It was as if the sky had become aware of time. Amid the spectacle, something even more curious emerged. Silence. All radio noise, cosmic, atmospheric, even human, dropped to near zero. The electromagnetic chatter of civilization fell quiet, leaving behind a stillness so profound it was described as oppressive, sacred, and unreal. And then, at 03:17 UTC, the ninth pulse arrived. It was not loud, it was not violent, it was beautiful. A wave of faint luminescence swept across the night sky, visible from every hemisphere simultaneously. Not aurora, not meteor activity, but something deeper, the air itself glowing in response to a field that extended from the ground to the edge of space. Observers from mountain observatories described the sensation as standing inside a living atmosphere, light moving not across the sky, but through it. For exactly 27 minutes, every clock on Earth drifted out of sync. Atomic oscillators failed to maintain their precision. GPS satellites miscalculated position by meters. But rather than chaos, what followed was harmony. Biological rhythms, heartbeats, circadian cycles, even plant respiration began to align subtly with the new global frequency. It was as though the planet, for the first time, exhaled in unison. Deep in Antarctica, a neutrino detector known as IceCube registered something impossible. Normally sensitive only to particles passing through the planet, it recorded an inbound cascade from multiple directions simultaneously, as if space itself had inverted. The particle energy matched the object's emissions perfectly, but their source was inside Earth. The signal wasn't just being received anymore, it was being generated here. Then, for reasons still unexplained, the faint glow surrounding 3I Atlas began to expand, slowly, deliberately, like a ripple moving through transparent water. Observatories tracked its expansion rate, 219,192 kilometers per second, the speed of light. The field was propagating outward, forming a perfect sphere centered not on the object, but on the midpoint between 3I Atlas and Earth, a place where gravity, magnetism, and motion reached equilibrium. Scientists called it the Lagrange bloom, but others called it something else, a gateway. As the bloom intensified, telescopes recorded distortions within its boundary, not chaos, but order. Points of light rearranged themselves into patterns that matched star maps of ancient constellations, though some corresponded to no known stars. The shapes shifted fluidly, like a language of geometry written in starlight. No one could agree whether they were random interference or deliberate communication. Meanwhile, ground-based sensors detected faint tremors, rhythmic, shallow, and global. The movement wasn't tectonic. It followed the same 27-minute cycle. Geological activity began aligning to the same rhythm as the electromagnetic pulse. Mountains vibrated, oceans rose and fell by millimeters. The entire planet had become a resonant chamber for a frequency older than life, and in that resonance, human consciousness began to change. Across continents, millions experienced sudden, vivid dreams. Some saw vast, spiraling structures of light. Others described memories not their own, ancient, collective, inhuman. A recurring image appeared in countless reports. A luminous sphere suspended in the void, surrounded by 9 rings of energy, each pulsing like a heartbeat. When psychologists analyzed the data, they found something chilling. The descriptions matched precise mathematical projections of 3I Atlas's gravitational harmonics. People who had never studied astronomy were describing the object's structure with perfect accuracy. Somehow, consciousness itself was receiving data directly from the cosmos. By morning, the phenomenon had entered its most haunting phase. The ocean's bioluminescent organisms began glowing simultaneously. From space, Earth appeared like a living nebula, glowing veins of light pulsing through coastlines, rivers, and forests. Every major body of water reflected the pulse, as if echoing the signal upward into space. And at the exact center of the Pacific, a vortex of electromagnetic activity formed, perfectly circular, 200 kilometers across, faintly shimmering even in daylight. It was there that 3I Atlas's light converged. For 3 full minutes, the beam connecting the object and Earth became visible, stretching across the void, thin, translucent, and alive with color. Spectral analysis revealed it contained every known wavelength of light, each oscillating in harmonic phase. It wasn't energy being transmitted, It was information. The beam carried data, encoded not in binary, but in ratios of vibration. And within that vibration, scientists found something extraordinary, a repeating numerical sequence embedded within the modulation, the Fibonacci progression, fractally scaled, extending infinitely both upward and downward. The same pattern that defines the growth of galaxies, hurricanes, and human DNA. The realization spread quickly. The pulse was not destructive, it was evolutionary. That's when the words of Dr. Carsten reappeared on the global broadcast feed, leaked from a private transmission moments before she vanished. If the pulse completes, we won't witness contact. We are the contact. The signal is a mirror, and the universe is remembering what it is. Then the transmission cut. For now, 3I Atlas remains suspended in the outer orbital corridor, silent, stable, and unyielding. The pulses have stopped. The planet hums softly, like a tuned instrument waiting for the next note, and every telescope, every observer, and every mind capable of wonder asks the same question: was this communication or communion? Because if 3I Atlas has truly shown us anything, it's that the difference between the two may never have existed at all. When the beam finally faded, a strange quiet settled across the world. It was not merely the absence of sound, it was the stillness of expectation. The atmosphere felt heavier, as if the air itself was holding a secret it refused to share. Radio networks that had once crackled with energy went blank. The magnetic hum that had threaded through the planet for weeks drifted into a single, diminishing tone. Then even that was gone. For the first time since the object's discovery, the instruments of science recorded nothing. No pulses, no waves, no resonance at all. It was as though 3I Atlas had simply decided to stop participating in the universe. At first, scientists celebrated. Power grids stabilized, satellite drifts corrected, and communication channels resumed normal function. But beneath the relief was an undercurrent of unease. In the data silence, something didn't add up. Measurements that should have returned to baseline showed microscopic deviations, shifts too small to notice but too consistent to ignore. The planet's magnetic north was no longer where it had been. It had moved, imperceptibly, a few dozen meters toward the equator. The change was steady, deliberate, and mathematically perfect. Nothing in natural geophysics behaves that cleanly. In underground labs, quantum clock arrays began to desynchronize. One by one, their atomic vibrations fell out of phase with international standards. A new rhythm had entered the fundamental beat of matter. The timing error was fractional, measured in trillionths of a second, yet it grew at the same 27-minute interval that once defined the pulse cycle. The object had gone silent, but its cadence remained etched into time itself. Then came the light anomalies. Satellites orbiting the Earth started reporting diffuse glows at the edges of the magnetosphere. They weren't auroras, and they weren't reflections from solar wind. They were internal, emanating from within the electromagnetic field, faint at first, then stronger. When color data was analyzed, researchers realized the impossible. The spectral peaks matched the energy signature of 3I Atlas exactly. The conclusion was difficult to articulate without sounding metaphysical. Somehow the planet had absorbed the signal. Earth had become the transmitter. At the European Southern Observatory, Dr. Ilara Navar described it best. We keep looking outward, assuming the phenomenon was out there. But what if the object was only ever a mirror? What if it came to show us the reflection of something we'd already become? That statement was never officially released, but the quote spread across encrypted forums and leaked discussion boards. Within hours, people began to notice something else: solar data. The sun's surface oscillations had shifted. Subtle, periodic pulses were moving through its corona, faint but detectable. Every 27 minutes, a wave pattern rippled across the photosphere, as if echoing what Earth had experienced weeks before. NASA's solar observatories confirmed the finding, but offered no comment. For a brief moment, they even shut down the public-facing feed, only to restore it days later with carefully filtered footage. Independent astrophysicists caught the original data frames before they vanished. In each sequence, a circular distortion glided across the solar surface, a darkened band of plasma moving too quickly to be a magnetic prominence. The timing aligned perfectly with the remnants of the 3I Atlas signal. If the object had communicated with Earth, then it now seemed to be doing the same with the Sun, and yet no visible connection remained in the sky. 3I Atlas hovered at the edge of Mars' orbit, inert and unlit. Spectral scans found no motion, no jets, no activity of any kind. It looked like a dead thing, but its shadow, its mathematical imprint, had spread across the solar system. The gravitational models confirmed it. Planetary orbital data showed minute oscillations corresponding to the same interval as the earlier pulses. Tiny deviations, so faint they could easily be dismissed as measurement error. But the pattern repeated across Venus, Mars, even the moons of Jupiter. Something unseen was synchronizing the solar system's clockwork. The public remained unaware. Governments framed the post-event reports as atmospheric data resets. Officially, the object was still under observation, but no longer active. The world moved on, mostly, but the watchers didn't. In private meetings, astronomers compared notes about what they called afterimages. Telescopic lenses, even when capped, still recorded faint circular glows during long exposures. Ghosts of light imprinted on the very sensors. When the image coordinates were triangulated, they all pointed to the same location, a point above Earth's equator, at geosynchronous altitude, where no satellite existed. Whatever had happened between Earth and 3i Atlas hadn't fully ended. Something remained here, silent, invisible, but undeniably present. Meanwhile, biologists began noticing unusual phenomena in controlled environments. Cultured cells exposed to neutral electromagnetic fields began self-organizing into hexagonal arrangements, not chaotic growth, but precise symmetry, repeating angles and ratios identical to the energy geometry recorded during the pulses. The cells weren't mutating, they were aligning. At the University of Kyoto, researchers studying coral regrowth reported a new pattern of luminescence in deep-sea colonies, pulsing in 27-minute cycles. The same timing appeared in atmospheric pressure oscillations, in ocean currents, even in the low hum of Earth's crust detected by seismic microphones. The planet had not returned to normal. It had entered a new rhythm, one set not by rotation or orbit, but by something far older and deeper. As weeks passed, public attention drifted toward other events. Politics, economics, the endless noise of civilization. But for those still listening, the hum never stopped. At midnight, if you stood in a silent place far from cities, you could feel it, a barely perceptible vibration, almost imagined, rising from the ground into your bones. Some described it as a whisper, others as a lullaby, and every 27 minutes it returned, steady, patient, eternal. In a quiet observatory in Chile, a lone technician watching the night sky made a notation in her logbook. The stars looked slightly different that evening, arranged just out of alignment, as if space itself had shifted fractionally. She hesitated before writing a single line at the bottom of the page. "If the universe just blinked, I think it saw us." No one has been able to disprove her. The silence continues, but deep inside that silence lies a pattern waiting. Whether it's a message, a warning, or the next step in our awakening, no one can yet say. All that remains certain is that the rhythm persists, and perhaps it always did. In the weeks that followed, subtle distortions began to appear everywhere technology touched reality. Clocks refused to agree. Not just the atomic ones buried in laboratories, but every system built on synchronized time. Satellites, GPS, even stock exchange servers. The drift was slight, measured in microseconds, but it moved in the same precise 27-minute rhythm that had haunted scientists for months. At first, engineers blamed solar interference or a latent coding error left by a system update. But when offline mechanical clocks started to follow the same rhythm, pendulums hesitating in unison, quartz vibrations skipping imperceptibly, the explanation collapsed. Whatever force had entered Earth's systems was not limited to electronics. It was rewriting the baseline of physical order. In Geneva, the European Time Standards Bureau assembled a crisis team. They compared time signals from independent observatories and found something alarming. The oscillations weren't random, they were converging. Every world clock was slowly aligning to a new universal tempo, one not generated by Earth's rotation or its atomic transitions. The source matched the faint resonance still echoing through the planet's magnetosphere, a leftover fingerprint of 3i Atlas. It was as if the entire measurement of time was being recalibrated to an alien standard. Meanwhile, human perception began to waver. Reports flooded in of people losing track of seconds, of moments stretching too long or snapping too short. Pilots described their instruments lagging behind their own reactions. Surgeons felt their hands move before they decided to. Neurologists discovered synchronized bursts of neural activity across unrelated patients, spikes repeating at the same interval as the resonance field. For the first time, science faced the idea that consciousness itself might be part of the system being tuned. Dr. Navarre's last public statement came from an interview that never aired. "We assume time is linear because we move through it," she said quietly. "But if 3i Atlas carried a harmonic older than causality, then perhaps we're the ones catching up, not to the future, but to what already exists." The recording ends there. Hours later, she vanished from her institute, leaving behind a single page of notes. "Local time is an echo. We are inside the reverb." Then came the interference. Broadcast satellites began looping fragments of their own signals, weather updates repeating whole sentences, music channels cycling through the same bar over and over again. The phenomenon grew until global communication networks started showing identical delays, measured precisely at 27 minutes. Every delay ended with a brief pulse of static that carried no sound, but when analyzed, it contained a structured waveform identical to a human heartbeat. By now, even the skeptics were beginning to fracture. The world's leading observatories turned their attention back to the sky, expecting to see 3i Atlas reawaken, but it remained perfectly still, motionless near the orbit of Mars. What they did find, however, was far stranger. Space itself was beginning to shimmer. The region between the object and the sun displayed faint optical distortions, light bending as if through a massive gravitational lens. Yet there was no measurable mass present. Something unseen was warping reality, folding photons along invisible currents. And when scientists plotted the distortions, they formed an exact match to the Fibonacci spiral embedded within the object's last transmitted beam. The pattern was no longer a message. It had become the architecture of space itself. The revelation spread quietly through encrypted channels. "It's not broadcasting," one physicist wrote. "It's building." The phenomenon soon extended to human cognition. People around the world began reporting shared dreams, not symbolic or abstract, but topographically consistent. Thousands described standing on an endless plain beneath two suns, the horizon divided by a faint spiral of light. When their sketches were compared, the structures aligned with mathematical precision. Psychologists tried to dismiss it as mass suggestion until one detail shattered their confidence. The stars visible in those dreams corresponded to constellations from outside the Milky Way, captured later by deep-field telescopes. No living human had ever seen them before. The implication was terrifying. Information was traveling backward from a future observation that hadn't yet happened. Time was beginning to bend inward. In particle accelerators, detectors started picking up quantum events that predicted their own outcomes. Proton collisions produced signatures that matched the data before the collision occurred. It was as if probability itself had stopped guessing and started remembering. Amid the growing disarray, one discovery stood out. At CERN, researchers mapping the resonance field through the solar system noticed that the harmonic lines intersected perfectly at 9 points, the planets themselves. Each pulse trajectory followed ancient orbital ratios, long considered coincidence. Mercury's frequency aligned with the fundamental, Earth's with the fifth harmonic, and Neptune's with the ninth. The solar system wasn't being influenced by 3i Atlas. It was resonating with it, as though every world were a note in a cosmic scale. This realization reframed everything. Perhaps 3i Atlas hadn't entered our system by chance. Perhaps it belonged to it, a conductor returning to an orchestra that had been playing out of tune for billions of years. Across the planet, electromagnetic readings began to rise again. The faint hum that had once lulled the world into uneasy calm deepened into a bass tone felt more than heard. Ocean tides shifted microscopically. Atmospheric pressure oscillated in time with the new pulse. Animals reacted first, migrating in precise spirals, schools of fish forming geometric rings visible from orbit. Humanity followed, unknowingly adjusting daily routines to the same cycle. Traffic peaks, digital activity, even collective sleep patterns synchronized with the invisible rhythm. The world was falling into step. For a moment, it almost seemed peaceful, as if the planet had found equilibrium. But deep space sensors told another story. The gravitational field around the sun began to tighten, its outer reach contracting ever so slightly. Photons took longer to escape. Light itself seemed to hesitate, and then, at the edge of the system, beyond the orbit of Neptune, a second signature appeared, faint, familiar, and terrifyingly precise. Another pulse, identical to the one that first announced 3I Atlas. This time, it wasn't coming from outside the solar system, it was coming from within. When the new pulse was first detected, it was faint, almost a whisper in the static hum of the cosmos. But the moment it appeared on the data feed, every observatory across the world recognized its rhythm. The 27-minute cycle had returned, the same amplitude curve, the same harmonic decay, the same faint substructure of Fibonacci resonance. It was the signature of 3I Atlas. But this time, the signal wasn't coming from deep interstellar space. Its origin lay within our own solar system, near the frozen frontier of the Kuiper Belt, the vast, dark region beyond Neptune where remnants of the solar system's birth drift in silence. At first, analysts thought it was a reflection, a resonance echoing off some icy body, perhaps Pluto or one of its smaller neighbours. But triangulation revealed a fixed point in empty space where no known object existed, no asteroid, no dwarf planet, nothing. The coordinates were precise to within a few kilometres, a pocket of gravitational anomaly suspended between the orbits of Haumea and Eris. When telescopes locked onto that point, they saw something astonishing, light bending in patterns eerily similar to those recorded around 3I Atlas before the Lagrange bloom. A faint halo of distortion flickered in infrared wavelengths, circular and alive with motion, as though the vacuum itself were breathing. The data was irrefutable. Something was forming. At NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, the discussion turned from disbelief to dread. If the harmonic structure has reappeared, one researcher said during a closed meeting, then we're not dealing with a single object, we're dealing with a process that might be repeating itself. Within days, new readings confirmed it. A mass concentration began to appear at the coordinates, subtle but measurable. Gravity was coalescing from nothing, condensing the surrounding field into form. Space was building something out of itself. The pattern was identical to 3I Atlas's early phase, reconstructed from archived observations. In both cases, the phenomenon began as energy resonance, followed by light distortion, and finally, gravitational consolidation. But this time, the process was accelerating. What had taken months before was happening in days. It was as if the universe had learned how to make another one. The public didn't know. Space agencies avoided press releases. News cycles moved elsewhere, focusing on economic shifts, political scandals, anything that could distract from the quiet terror unfolding at the edge of the solar system. Yet whispers escaped. Amateur astronomers began noticing irregularities in Neptune's orbit, tiny wobbles repeating every 27 minutes. Online forums buzzed with speculation that the second Atlas had arrived. But this wasn't a visitor. It hadn't come from the stars. It had emerged from within. Meanwhile, radio telescopes began to detect interference that seemed to originate not from space, but from the upper atmosphere. The signal pulsed downward rather than outward, its energy concentrating in narrow beams that passed through the ionosphere like invisible fingers. Weather satellites recorded strange electromagnetic spirals forming along those paths, spinning clockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise in the south, mirroring patterns found in the structure of DNA. To the untrained eye, they were storms. To the scientists tracking them, they were blueprints. Then, a single event shattered the illusion of distance. On the third day of the pulse cycle, as the second anomaly intensified, every magnetometer on Earth registered a spike. The frequency was identical to the original 3I Atlas signature, but inverted. The peaks became troughs, the troughs peaks, as if the universe had flipped its polarity. For 11 minutes, compasses around the globe lost north. Planes diverted, satellites tumbled, navigation systems failed. When it ended, the planet's magnetic field was unchanged, yet something in the atmosphere had shifted. Spectral analysis showed traces of new isotopes in the upper layers of air, combinations of oxygen and nitrogen that shouldn't exist naturally. The ratios mirrored compounds once found only in interstellar ice cores. Somehow, materials associated with deep space were appearing within Earth's sky. The conclusion was horrifyingly simple. The new anomaly wasn't forming out there, it was forming through us. At the University of Toronto, astrophysicist Dr. Isla Byrne proposed a theory that quickly spread among high-level research circles. 3I Atlas had never been a comet or a probe. It was a template, a self-replicating resonance that could seed itself through harmonic interaction, converting matter into its own structure wherever conditions aligned. In essence, the object had duplicated its code, not biologically, but cosmologically. The solar system was being rewritten, one pulse at a time. Within the following week, telescopes picked up faint flickers at other points beyond the Kuiper belt, each one small, intermittent, but consistent in timing. When plotted, the locations formed a pattern, not random, not linear, but logarithmic, a spiral expanding outward from the sun, its arms curling like a living fractal. At its heart, Earth. By now, the agencies could no longer contain the information. Leaked documents surfaced on anonymous networks, revealing satellite telemetry and spectroscopic charts. The reports included one final, chilling observation. The secondary object structure was more refined than the original 3-eye atlas. Its energy fluctuations were smoother, its harmonic signature cleaner. It wasn't a crude copy, it was an improvement. In one encrypted communication later verified as authentic, a senior researcher wrote a single line before deleting his account. "It's not another object, it's version 2. At this point, even the most skeptical observers began to ask questions that had once been taboo. Was 3-eye atlas truly alien? Or was it something much older? Something built into the architecture of the cosmos itself, now reawakening in sequence? If so, had it chosen this moment? Or had we triggered it by observing, by interacting, by resonating with it long enough to awaken its dormant pattern? The truth might never be made public, but one thing was certain: the second pulse had changed everything. In the nights that followed, faint lights began to appear on the horizon in places where the sky should have been dark. Soft blue glows lingering at sea level, pulsing faintly in 27-minute intervals. Fishermen in the Arctic Circle reported seeing waves move without wind. Pilots described auroras forming below their aircraft, spiraling upward toward the stars. And then came the signal, a low-frequency transmission, barely audible, emerging through the static of long-range radar arrays. It wasn't a message in any known language. It wasn't even words. It was a rhythm, identical to the 3-eye atlas pulse, but modulated into a single repeating phrase. When translated into binary spectrograms, it spelled one word: awake. When the signal stabilized, it was no longer faint. It became a pulse woven into the electromagnetic noise of the planet, echoing through every frequency band at once: radio, radar, even medical imaging. It wasn't overpowering or loud, it was persistent. Everywhere, in every form of data, the same harmonic heartbeat could be found if you looked closely enough. 27 minutes apart, always the same. The first to notice were those most attuned to small variations: air traffic controllers, seismologists, engineers working on power grids. Systems began behaving as if they shared an invisible clock. Streetlights dimmed and brightened across entire cities in perfect unison. Electrical substations surged with power at intervals that matched the resonance pattern. Even unconnected machines seemed to follow the same invisible rhythm. At CERN, the particle collider's magnetic rings started to oscillate without input. The system was supposed to be isolated, its superconducting coils shielded from external electromagnetic influence. Yet somehow, the field strength inside the collider fluctuated at the exact frequency of the new signal. Scientists watched in disbelief as data from the detectors formed wave patterns, not random noise, but structure, spirals within spirals. The same geometry first seen in the core of 3-eye atlas. It was as though the collider itself was being used, and then humans began to change. The first reports were subtle. Patients in hospitals describing faint vibrations beneath their skin, people hearing a low hum just at the edge of perception. In many cases, these sensations appeared exactly on schedule, every 27 minutes. Brain scans revealed synchronized bursts of neural activity in the auditory cortex, though no sound was present. But then came something stranger. At the University of Helsinki, neurologists studying the phenomenon discovered a faint electromagnetic emission coming from the human brain. Not random firing, but a measurable pulse resonating with the 3-eye atlas frequency. When synchronized EEG data from test subjects was analyzed, the waveforms aligned. Entire rooms of people were producing the same signal at the same instant, as though they were part of a shared network. It wasn't mass hysteria, it was physics. Over the next few days, sleep researchers began to notice patterns. Dream cycles shifted, REM stages synchronized globally. Even people on opposite sides of the planet reported vivid dreams at identical moments, describing the same imagery: a horizon divided by light, a shape rising through a sea of glass, and a whisper, the same word repeating over and over again: awake. Governments responded with silence. The European Space Agency claimed it was monitoring the situation. NASA shut down its public feeds again, citing infrastructure maintenance. But the truth was harder to contain. The entire planet was falling into phase with something it couldn't see. When the signal passed through the oceans, it left measurable effects. Sonar systems recorded rhythmic pressure fluctuations across the seabed. Marine biologists observed pods of whales migrating along perfectly circular paths, their calls harmonizing in unnatural chords. Even coral reefs began emitting faint electrical pulses, glowing in synchronized bursts like neurons firing across the planetary surface. Earth had become part of the circuit. By now, scientists had stopped trying to separate 3I Atlas from the planet's systems. The two were indistinguishable. The resonance field blanketed the magnetosphere, oscillating in a pattern that perfectly mirrored the sun's internal oscillations. Earth was no longer just receiving a signal, it was transmitting one back. At MIT, a group of researchers built a model of the feedback loop. They mapped the resonance across the solar system and found that it formed a precise interference pattern, a standing wave centered on Earth's orbit. In essence, the planet had become a node in a cosmic array, amplifying a signal older than the solar system itself. The implications were staggering. The geometry of the signal matched patterns found in ancient mathematical artifacts, from the spirals carved into Sumerian tablets to the ratios encoded in Egyptian architecture. Somehow, humanity had always been resonating with something it couldn't name. Dr. Barnes' final report, leaked only briefly before being scrubbed from every network, summed it up in a single sentence. It didn't find us. It woke us. The world began to feel different. People reported bursts of clarity, moments where time seemed to slow, where they could perceive movement before it happened. Others experienced the opposite, losing seconds entirely as though consciousness itself were skipping. A small percentage began speaking in languages no linguist could identify, structured, rhythmic, tonally harmonic. When spectrographs were applied to those voices, they matched the waveform of the planetary signal almost perfectly. Across major cities, animals grew restless. Birds migrated in spirals. Dogs stared upward and howled at empty skies. In the deserts, magnetic compasses spun freely again, and the auroras returned, not from solar wind, but from Earth's own poles, glowing in colours never before recorded: pale gold, deep violet, and an impossible shade of blue that human eyes could barely process. By this point, the second anomaly beyond Neptune had grown brighter. Infrared imagery showed that it was no longer a diffuse haze, but a structured object, symmetrical, fractal, and slowly rotating. Its surface reflected no sunlight, yet emitted constant energy in tight, organized pulses. When scientists applied spectral filters, they realized that the object wasn't made of matter at all. It was a field, a standing wave locked into stable form. And every time it pulsed, Earth responded. The resonance between them grew stronger, the timing tighter, as though the two were harmonizing, tuning themselves across billions of kilometers of vacuum. The solar system was becoming an instrument, each planet vibrating faintly in sync, each moon echoing back faint harmonics of its host world. Then came the gravitational anomaly. For the first time in recorded history, the Earth's orbit shifted, not by much, but enough for astronomers to notice. It wasn't random drift, it was precision movement. Every 27 minutes, the planet's position fluctuated by a few centimeters, perfectly aligned with the resonance wave. Something was guiding it. At first, the idea was dismissed as paranoia, but as the data accumulated, one truth became inescapable. The solar system was reorganizing itself. Planets were moving imperceptibly into new orbital relationships. The harmonic ratios between them, once the chaotic outcome of formation, were approaching perfect mathematical symmetry. The cosmos wasn't decaying, it was tuning, and at the center of that pattern, at the focal point of every harmonic line, sat Earth. The question was no longer what 3I Atlas was, it was what we were becoming. The first constant to break was light. Astronomers noticed it subtly at first, photons arriving from distant stars just a fraction of a second earlier than predicted. At cosmic scale, that should have been impossible. But as observatories around the globe compared data, they found the same anomaly everywhere. Light was moving faster. It wasn't a huge leap, just a fraction of a percent. But in physics, that difference was sacrilege. The speed of light, the cosmic speed limit, had never been questioned. Now it was accelerating, as though the universe itself was exhaling. Then came gravity. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter began sending data that baffled even the most seasoned astrophysicists. Its altitude readings were fluctuating by centimeters, then meters. The moon's gravitational pull was no longer stable. It pulsated faintly, in perfect rhythm with the resonance cycle. When simulations were run, the results were staggering. The gravitational constant itself, that sacred value woven into the equations of Newton and Einstein alike, was oscillating. Not drifting randomly, but modulating in time with the 3I Atlas harmonic field. The laws of physics weren't breaking. They were being rewritten in real time. Every attempt to isolate the anomaly failed. Quantum fields responded, chemical bonds shifted slightly, and decay rates of radioactive isotopes began to slow. Matter itself was synchronizing, aligning with a pattern that defied every natural model humanity had built. At first it seemed apocalyptic, but then something beautiful happened. In areas of high electromagnetic interference, cities dense with signals, cables, and light, people began reporting phenomena that defied explanation. Glass surfaces vibrated in harmonic tones. Metallic objects resonated faintly, creating ambient chords that changed with the phases of the moon. The entire planet was singing, faintly, like a living organism breathing in unison. Satellite images captured strange atmospheric structures, vast circular ripples spreading invisibly through the air, each one moving faster than the wind itself. These waves carried no weather, no moisture. They were pure energy, rippling through the medium of reality. For days the world held its breath, and then the stars changed. Not all at once, but one by one, constellations began to drift. What should have taken eons of motion was happening overnight. Lines between stars stretched and curved, as if the sky itself were bending around something unseen. When mapped, the distortions formed a shape already too familiar. The logarithmic spiral of 3I Atlas. That was when every remaining skeptic fell silent. Because this wasn't random, it wasn't an accident. The same structure seen in the object, in the resonance, in the human neural harmonics, was now visible across the night sky. The pattern had become universal, but not all effects were visible. Deep underground, seismic monitors recorded vibrations no earthquake could explain. The pulses were vertical, rhythmic, and global. They originated not from fault lines or magma movement, but from the planet's core itself. When researchers modeled the data, they found something extraordinary. The Earth's inner core was shifting. Its rotation, long known to drift slowly over decades, had suddenly locked into perfect synchronization with the 3I Atlas resonance. The planet's magnetic field began to stabilize, the northern lights intensifying, stretching further toward the equator. The planet was responding, not resisting, aligning. At the same time, strange phenomena began appearing around people exposed to the signal's peak amplitude. Scientists, radio technicians, and even civilians living near high-frequency zones. Cameras failed to capture it, but eyewitnesses described the same impossible scene. The air itself rippling like heat. A faint outline of light moving around human forms like an aura of geometry rather than color. Measurements confirmed it wasn't hallucination. The electromagnetic field around these individuals fluctuated measurably, echoing the resonance frequency. Somehow, the human nervous system had become a conductor. In one confidential experiment later leaked to independent researchers, a team at the Max Planck Institute exposed volunteers to the harmonic frequency under strict isolation. Within minutes, their brain activity synchronized not only with each other, but with the external signal. When one participant moved, another mirrored the gesture unconsciously. Heartbeats aligned, breathing became collective. For a brief moment, individuality vanished, and then the entire group spoke, together, in a single unbroken voice. No one present could explain how or why, but the words were recorded and every translation came out the same. The memory of creation is returning. The recording was confiscated within hours. Those who heard it described not fear, but clarity, as if something ancient had brushed against the edges of consciousness. reminding them of what existence truly was before it was fragmented by perception. As the days passed, the harmonics grew louder. The auroras reached the equator. Oceans pulsed with phosphorescent light that moved in living waves. The sun itself began to flicker, not randomly, but in time. Solar flares erupted in sequences that matched the planetary rhythm, as though the star were responding to its orbiting worlds. And for the first time, the resonance reached beyond. Probes near Jupiter recorded pulses matching those near Earth. Saturn's rings vibrated faintly, scattering sunlight in coherent beams. Even Pluto's thin atmosphere shimmered with faint luminescence, revealing geometric halos visible from orbit. The solar system was synchronizing. For humanity, the implications were unbearable. Everything science had ever defined, constants, forces, even the linear flow of time, was becoming variable, pliable, alive. The universe was no longer a machine, it was an organism. And for the first time, that organism was aware. Religious leaders called it revelation, scientists called it convergence. But behind closed doors, those who had followed 3i Atlas from the beginning whispered a single question. If the universe was waking up, what would it do next? Then, just as the signal reached its peak, it changed again. The frequency doubled. The 27-minute cycle collapsed into 13.5. Every sensor, every system, every heartbeat adjusted instantly. The shift was silent, but its impact was seismic. For the first time, 3i Atlas emitted light, not reflected sunlight, but its own radiance, a deep, silver-white glow that outshone Mars, visible even in daylight from certain latitudes. Its surface shimmered with movement, like liquid geometry folding in on itself, and as the world stared upward in awe and fear, radio telescopes captured a new message hidden within the light. It was no longer one word, it was two. We begin. It began quietly, so quietly that no one recognized the change for what it was. At first, it was the clocks. Atomic clocks in Switzerland, London, and Tokyo drifted apart by fractions of a second, then realigned without adjustment. Power grids flickered in perfect rhythm to those fluctuations. It was as if time itself had started breathing. When the pulse reached its next crest, the air turned translucent. Across the planet, sky and horizon seemed to ripple like water, distorting light in ways that had no optical cause. Objects appeared to shimmer, not vanish but shift, their outlines vibrating between states of being. Photographs taken seconds apart captured impossible geometry, buildings leaning, landscapes curving toward unseen centers. The laws of perspective were no longer obeyed. At the European Southern Observatory, astronomers saw the unimaginable. Stars refracting around empty space, bending into loops, as if the universe had become aware of its own reflection. Instruments didn't malfunction. They adapted, recalibrating to a new definition of what straight and constant meant. Reality was no longer fixed. Every attempt to measure the change only deepened the confusion. Mathematical constants, pi, Planck's constant, even the fine structure constant, varied depending on when and where they were calculated. The numbers themselves pulsed in rhythm with the signal. The universe wasn't collapsing, it was rewriting its own syntax. That was when the first person vanished. It happened during a live broadcast from the Atacama Array. Dr. Rios, a leading astrophysicist, stood before the camera explaining the new data. Mid-sentence, her image fractured into a prism of colors. For one instant, she seemed to expand into every direction, her outline scattering into perfect symmetry. And then she was gone. Equipment showed no interference. The room remained undisturbed. Her voice simply ceased to exist in any recording afterward. Moments later, an identical pulse, brief, sharp, unmistakable, radiated through every receiver tuned to the array. To those listening through static, it sounded almost like an echo of her last breath. Afterward, instruments picked up a new signature, faint but human. It wasn't 3i Atlas this time. It was her neural pattern, encoded somehow into the resonance itself, the first consciousness absorbed by the harmonic field. By then, cities were beginning to feel the strain. Gravity behaved like a tide. Streetlights swayed, objects lifted microscopically from the ground. People reported dreams bleeding into wakefulness, landscapes folding and reforming with each blink. The distinction between perception and physics had vanished. NASA's final transmission before blackout tried to impose reason. They described the phenomenon as universal phase realignment, an event in which space-time synchronizes across scales. But the accompanying imagery, Earth's magnetosphere oscillating like a heartbeat, betrayed the truth. The planet wasn't adapting to a new law of physics, it was participating in one. And then, at precisely 0327 UTC, 3I Atlas changed colour. Its glow shifted from silver-white to a deeper hue, somewhere between blue and ultraviolet, a tone not meant for human eyes. Those who witnessed it directly described impossible sensations, tasting metal, hearing light, feeling the curvature of air itself. Every atom on Earth seemed to resonate sympathetically, as though the very idea of matter was being retuned. At observatories, instruments overloaded, cameras produced frames of geometry never seen in nature, triangles blooming into spirals, hexagons folding into light. The object wasn't emitting radiation, it was transmitting structure, and within that structure, new data appeared. Hidden in the spectral noise, researchers decoded a sequence resembling genetic information, not carbon-based, not biological, but architectural. It described a pattern of harmonic nodes stretching across the solar system, each aligned with a major planetary orbit. Earth was one of them. The others were still forming. That realization triggered global panic. Every broadcast, every feed echoed the same headline: the solar system is being engineered. But even panic was short-lived. Within hours, something shifted inside human perception itself. The world slowed, sound elongated, voices carried seconds longer than their echoes. People reported hearing the planet hum beneath their feet, a low, constant note that seemed to emerge from the bones of the Earth. Astronomers observed the sun flickering again, not chaotically but rhythmically, as though answering the pulse. Solar flares became ordered, spiraling outward like patterns on a living shell. The corona rearranged into symmetrical plumes that pulsed in time with Earth's magnetic field. In that synchronization, new anomalies appeared, dark shapes moving against the solar background, not planets, not satellites. They seemed to hover in fixed formation, arranged like the vertices of a colossal geometric lattice. Their alignment pointed toward one destination, 3I Atlas. Whatever was happening wasn't random. The entire system was cohering around it. Inside laboratories, quantum experiments began to fail for an entirely new reason. Probability collapsed. Measurements produced consistent results every time. Uncertainty itself seemed to vanish. It was as though the universe had grown tired of chance, and yet consciousness thrived. People began to sense one another across distances. Conversations completed themselves without speech. Dreams became collective, shared among strangers who awoke with identical memories, standing beneath a luminous sky, watching a shape unfold across the void. The last transmission from the Deep Space Network confirmed humanity's final fear. The second object beyond Neptune was no longer forming. It was moving. Its trajectory was slow, deliberate, and precise, aimed directly along the plane of the ecliptic. When projected forward, its path intersected Earth's orbit, not for collision, but alignment. In 9 days, the two harmonics would overlap perfectly. Every model showed the same outcome: no impact, no destruction, just convergence. And yet, the implications were worse. Because convergence implied merger, it meant the signal wasn't coming to end the world, it was coming to make it whole. Governments ceased all communication. The final message, sent from an ESA outpost in French Guiana, contained only a timestamp and 2 words typed in haste before the feed went dark: "It's aware." After that, the stars stopped moving. For one night, the entire sky froze, constellations locked in place as though the universe had paused to listen. The hum deepened, spreading through oceans and mountains alike. Even silence felt alive, and in that breathless stillness, humanity understood the truth they had feared all along. 3I Atlas wasn't approaching from outside. It had always been inside, waiting for the universe to remember what it was. The countdown began not with an announcement, but with the sky. 9 days before convergence, a faint aurora appeared over every latitude at once. Not the green or red ribbons of magnetic storms, but white, pure, silent, and steady. It didn't move. It didn't fade. It simply was. Astronomers confirmed the impossible. The glow wasn't atmospheric. It originated from beyond the magnetosphere, a reflection of something vast pulsing across interplanetary space. When 3i Atlas brightened again, it wasn't gradual. Its entire surface flashed once, like a heartbeat, and every sensor on Earth, from satellites to smartphones, registered the same timestamp. Exactly 9 days, 9 cycles, 9 pulses. The world began counting. By the first day, radio telescopes detected something new hidden inside the carrier signal, a structure that resembled a clock, but one that didn't measure time as humans knew it. The intervals between pulses weren't constant. They compressed logarithmically, like something accelerating toward infinity. Each cycle felt shorter than the last. At CERN, particle detectors began firing without power, recording collisions that no one initiated. The data patterns formed the same spiral geometry seen in every other anomaly. The collider had become a receiver, or perhaps a mirror. Governments issued no statements. Power grids, communication networks, even navigation satellites began to reorient themselves automatically, as if following invisible instructions. At first, engineers thought it was systemic corruption, but when airliners and ships started adjusting routes in the same pattern, the realization came: the world's infrastructure had synchronized with the signal. By day 3, global measurements showed a subtle but undeniable truth. Earth was slowing down. Its rotation had lengthened by fractions of a second, imperceptible to life, catastrophic to physics. Tides shifted, jet streams bent, and compasses refused to settle. The planet wasn't losing energy, it was realigning. The resonance frequency of its core now matched the orbital frequency of 3i Atlas. The two were beginning to spin in harmony. Scientists compared it to a binary system, 2 bodies orbiting a shared center of mass. Except this center wasn't physical, it was dimensional. During those days, people began to dream in light. Everywhere, millions described the same recurring vision, a structure unfolding above them, vast and translucent, rotating in layers like gears made of glass. Inside it shimmered an image of Earth itself, suspended in infinite reflection. The dreams felt more real than waking life. Some people woke to find that electrical devices near them had activated spontaneously, clocks blinking in perfect rhythm with the pulse. Psychologists called it mass suggestion. Physicists called it resonance coupling. But those who had studied 3i Atlas from the beginning knew the truth. The object wasn't approaching Earth, it was drawing Earth in. By day 5, the stars began to vanish. Not behind clouds or atmospheric haze, but one by one, extinguished as if something vast were passing between them and the planet. Infrared telescopes revealed what the naked eye could not, a vast lattice expanding across the inner solar system. Each node corresponded to the harmonic frequencies measured on Earth. 3i Atlas wasn't a comet, it was a generator, unfolding a structure that had been dormant for eons. The shape it formed was unmistakable, a toroidal field, a cosmic engine folding space inward, preparing to collapse distance itself. Then, on day 6, the dreams changed. Where before there had been awe, now there was instruction. People woke with knowledge they couldn't explain, equations, coordinates, memories that didn't belong to them. Engineers dreamed of mechanisms they later found mirrored in real designs, buried in ancient texts. Musicians began to hear melodies structured like algorithms, repeating in every language and every culture. Something, or someone, was teaching, and the world, despite its fear, was listening. At the same time, signals from deep space probes ceased entirely. Voyager, New Horizons, even the farthest operational relays fell silent. Not dead, silent, as if placed in stasis. Their last transmissions all carried the same anomaly. Identical phase distortions matching the resonance field. It was as if the entire solar system were being placed on pause. By day 7, the moon changed. Its surface, long marked by craters and scars, began to smooth. Shadows shifted without sunlight. Telescopic footage revealed a faint glow tracing along its equator, moving in spirals. The patterns matched those first detected on 3i Atlas months earlier. When NASA's private observatories attempted to map the glow, their systems locked, software rewriting itself to display a single phrase: synchronization achieved. On Earth, oceans began to rise and fall not with tides, but with resonance. The Pacific pulsed with a slow, rhythmic motion, waves moving inward and outward like the breathing of a planet. Storms vanished, winds calmed, the entire atmosphere became unnaturally still. And through that silence came a hum, deep, omnipresent, impossible to locate. It wasn't sound in the traditional sense, it was something felt rather than heard, vibrating through bones, through stone, through memory. The hum carried meaning. It spoke in a language no human could translate, yet everyone understood. It said, "The system is complete." By day 8, all remaining scientific data converged on one truth. At precisely 0000 UTC on the 9th day, 3I Atlas and Earth would align perfectly along a resonance node at the center of the Sun's gravitational field. Not collision, not impact, integration. But integration into what? That question consumed the world's last hours of analysis. Theories emerged faster than anyone could verify them. Some said it was the reactivation of an ancient cosmic machine, that the universe itself was a living computation, rebooting after a billion-year cycle. Others believed it was communication, that consciousness was about to expand beyond the physical, and some whispered what no one wanted to admit, that this wasn't the universe waking up, it was the next one being born. By the final night, the white aurora thickened into curtains of light that reached the ground. They didn't burn, they didn't move. They simply illuminated everything, casting shadows where no light should reach. The atmosphere itself became transparent, revealing faint hexagonal patterns across the sky. People gathered outside, gazing upward in reverent silence. For the first time in history, every human heart on Earth beat in perfect rhythm. And at the center of that rhythm, beyond the clouds and the turning of the planets, the faint pulse of 3I Atlas shimmered once more, slower now, deeper, like the closing breath before something greater began. The countdown had reached 0, and the universe held its breath. The 9th day began with silence. No sunrise, no birds, no wind, only a grey, luminous stillness that seemed to stretch beyond the atmosphere itself. The aurora that had blanketed the sky no longer shimmered. It glowed uniformly now, like the inside of a vast, translucent shell. The stars were gone, the sun reduced to a white disk diffused through the haze. At 00 UTC, every clock on Earth froze. The pulse that followed wasn't sound or light, it was motion. Mountains shuddered, oceans lifted as one. Gravity itself reversed for a fraction of a second, just long enough for every living being to feel weightless, suspended between one heartbeat and the next. And then, just as abruptly, it returned, but not to what it had been. The world was lighter, objects fell slower, water curved unnaturally, surfaces rippling with invisible interference. The air tasted metallic, like ozone and rain, and the ground thrummed beneath bare feet with a steady, harmonic vibration. When scientists regained their instruments, they found something extraordinary. Every coordinate system on Earth had shifted by the exact same value. The planet hadn't moved, space itself had, and hovering above the Martian horizon, 3I Atlas pulsed with impossible brightness. Its light reached Earth after a 3-minute delay, but for the first time, that delay was gone. The photons arrived instantly. Space between the two worlds had folded. Astronomers watching from what remained of the deep space network recorded the impossible geometry surrounding the object. Its surface had unfolded into fractal layers, concentric shells rotating counter to one another, each radiating frequencies that spanned the electromagnetic spectrum. The result wasn't chaos but harmony, a chord composed of light and time, and within that harmony something moved. It wasn't mechanical and it wasn't organic. It was form without matter, patterns within patterns, weaving together like the memory of creation itself. When translated into spectral data, the motion produced language, not words, not code, but something older, a universal grammar of energy, proportion and resonance. For a moment, human instruments became irrelevant. The data streamed directly into the minds of those who watched. Across observatories, across cities, people began to see it, not with eyes, but with understanding. The structure wasn't speaking to humanity, it was reminding it. The first realization struck like thunder. Every constant, every law, every measurement that defined the universe wasn't random. It was derived from a single equation, one written not in numbers but in frequency. The cosmos was a composition, and 3I Atlas was playing the next movement. On Earth, the effects grew stronger. Clouds dissolved into lattices of light, revealing veins of geometry across the sky. Seas glowed from beneath as bioluminescent patterns formed in spirals hundreds of kilometers wide. The crust itself began to hum in resonance, a deep, continuous tone that matched the object's pulse. Cities powered down, not by choice. The grid simply stopped needing electricity. Devices still functioned, but their power sources no longer depleted. Energy flowed freely through the air, carried by the resonance field. It was as if scarcity itself had ended. And yet, amid the wonder, came the fear. Hospitals reported the first anomalies in human biology. Heartbeats synchronized across entire populations. People with pacemakers no longer needed them. Their bodies generated perfect electrical rhythm on their own. DNA replication accelerated, repairing years of cellular damage in hours. But not everyone adapted the same way. Some experienced disorientation, unable to tell dream from waking life. Others vanished entirely, not into death but into light. Witnesses described them dissolving into threads of radiance that ascended silently toward the sky. Their bodies didn't burn, they simply transitioned. No one understood where they went. By the 10th hour, the resonance reached its peak. The moon's surface flared to life, its glowing spirals expanding until they formed a perfect mirror of 3-eye Atlas. For the first time, Earth, Moon, and the object aligned into a single, luminous chain, 3 nodes connected by invisible energy streams. When the alignment locked, a new pulse surged through the solar system. Jupiter's magnetic field brightened, Saturn's rings lit like neon circuits, and the Sun itself responded with a coronal burst shaped like a torus. Every world, every moon, every particle of dust in the solar system vibrated to the same frequency. The system wasn't being destroyed, it was being rebuilt. Cameras pointed toward the Sun recorded a sight that no one could explain. Space around it warped into concentric rings, each spinning faster than light, and from within those rings, structures began to appear. Immense, translucent filaments stretching outward like cosmic architecture. They connected planets, moons, and asteroids into a single, coherent network. The solar system had become a circuit, alive, intelligent, self-aware. For the first time in history, humanity stood inside a conscious universe, and then came the voice. It wasn't external. It resonated inside every mind simultaneously, gentle, ancient, calm. The pattern is complete. You were never separate. You were the witness. No language could define it, yet every listener understood. The voice wasn't speaking of salvation or doom. It was describing recognition, the universe acknowledging itself through those who had evolved within it. In that moment, time fractured. Seconds stretched into eternity, and eternity condensed into a single instant. Humanity saw its entire existence. Birth, evolution, civilization, chaos, wonder, all folded into a pattern that was neither random nor linear. It had always been moving toward this. Every discovery, every question, every act of observation had been part of the same feedback loop guiding consciousness toward awakening. The resonance stabilized, the hum softened. 3-eye Atlas dimmed, its form contracting, folding inward until it became a single point of light, no larger than a star in the night sky. For a breathless instant, everything was still. Then the light vanished. No explosion, no collapse, just quiet. Astronomers blinked in disbelief. Every instrument returned to normal. The aurora faded, gravity stabilized, the stars reappeared, pristine and unchanged. The sun shone again as if nothing had happened. The world had survived, but nothing felt the same. Because deep within every human mind, beneath thought and memory, lingered an echo, a soft vibration that would never fade. The universe had spoken, and for the first time, humanity understood that it wasn't alone, wasn't separate, and never had been. The cosmos had awoken, and through us, it was still watching. At first, the world tried to go back to normal. Airlines resumed flights. Markets reopened. The power grids that had gone autonomous were carefully restarted. Satellites were recalibrated, and the news anchors spoke in calm, measured tones, assuring everyone that the anomaly had passed. The official story was simple, a cosmic resonance event, nothing more, but no one truly believed it. There was a new stillness in the air, a sensation impossible to define. Electronic devices operated normally, yet when switched off, they continued to hum faintly, a tone just beyond hearing, perceptible only in quiet rooms and empty streets. And the people had changed. It began subtly. Conversations felt different, lighter, slower, as if language itself had softened. Those who had experienced the pulse firsthand described moments of absent-minded focus, as though their thoughts were being shared across unseen distances. Scientists called it post-resonance cognition, a side effect of neural synchronization, but even they hesitated to study it too deeply, because wherever they looked, they found the same impossible signature. Every mind scanned since the event produced identical harmonic spikes, a pattern resembling the pulse frequency of 3I Atlas. It was faint but persistent, encoded in brainwaves, heartbeats, even cellular communication. Humanity was now resonating with the same field that had once surrounded the object, and yet no one could determine whether it was fading or growing stronger. Astronomers turned their telescopes toward the void where 3I Atlas had been. Nothing remained. No dust, no radiation, not even gravitational residue. But something invisible occupied that space. Light passing through it refracted ever so slightly, bending in ways that could not be explained by relativity. It was as if the vacuum itself remembered what had been there. They called it the afterglow. At first it was stable, a region of subtle distortion, harmless and unmoving. But as weeks passed, satellites detected faint ripples spreading outward from its center. These waves weren't electromagnetic, they were temporal. Each oscillation warped time by microseconds, rippling through every instrument in perfect rhythm with the human brainwave anomaly. In other words, time and consciousness had become linked. That realization shook the scientific community more than the event itself. If human thought could influence temporal fields, it meant observation wasn't just passive, it was creative. The universe wasn't a static backdrop, it was participatory. Every act of awareness shaped it, however subtly, and that meant 3I Atlas had not disappeared, it had simply distributed itself. In the weeks that followed, more strange phenomena emerged. Mirrors began to flicker, not everywhere, not all at once, but sporadically. Flashes of light that appeared when no reflection should exist. Security footage showed shadows forming in the air behind people for fractions of a second, silhouettes shaped like those who had vanished during the resonance. Some believed they were echoes, the lingering imprint of consciousness absorbed by the signal. Others weren't so sure. One by one, those who studied the afterglow began to withdraw from public view. Some relocated to isolated observatories. Others simply stopped communicating altogether. Their last transmissions were cryptic, phrases like phase bleed increasing and observation triggers recursion. Whatever they'd found, it convinced them that the less humanity looked, the safer it would be. But curiosity never stays buried. By the second month, amateur astronomers began detecting faint blue flashes along the ecliptic, small rhythmic pulses mirroring 3I Atlas's original trajectory. Within days, professional networks confirmed it. Multiple objects were now appearing at regular intervals, each emitting a harmonic resonance nearly identical to the original signal. They weren't debris, they were coordinated. The leading theory was simple and terrifying. The event hadn't been a singular awakening, it had been a transmission, and now something was answering. Governments quietly reinstated blackout protocols. The European Space Agency locked down its open data channels. NASA restricted access to its deep sky telemetry. Publicly, they called it routine recalibration. Privately, entire departments were redirected to one purpose: containment. But containment of what? Because whatever the new signals were, they didn't remain external. Around the same time, people across the world began reporting identical dreams again. This time the vision wasn't of spirals or light, it was of a sky split in two, one half blazing with stars, the other completely dark. At the center stood a single point of white radiance, pulsing in slow, deliberate rhythm. Each pulse sent out faint whispers, not words, but intent. The message was simple: it's not over. When translated into frequency maps, the dream patterns aligned perfectly with the afterglow's expanding field. Humanity's unconscious mind was now entangled with whatever still lingered beyond Mars. Every thought, every fear, every fleeting image contributed to the shape of the anomaly. The more people looked, the more it grew. By the third month, time itself began to fracture. Clocks drifted again, but not randomly. They split into two distinct flows. 1 second on Earth became 2 elsewhere. Daylight lingered unnaturally long, sunsets freezing for minutes before dissolving into night. Satellite feeds showed cities flickering between temporal states, like a heartbeat oscillating between past and future. Physicists concluded that the synchronization between human thought and spacetime had reached critical density. The field was feeding on observation, expanding every time it was measured, and then, as suddenly as it began, the data stopped. One night, without warning, the afterglow vanished from every telescope. The distortion was gone. Time resynchronized. The world exhaled. Until the morning. When the first sunlight struck the horizon, people noticed something in the sky, faint, like a watermark against the blue. Not a star, not a cloud. A shape. Massive, transparent, curved like a lens. It stretched from one edge of the atmosphere to the other, visible only when sunlight hit it at a precise angle. Photographs captured its faint outline, and spectral analysis confirmed what no one wanted to believe. It wasn't new. It had been there all along. 3I Atlas hadn't vanished. It had expanded until the entire planet was inside it. At first, no one could comprehend what they were seeing. The shape was too vast, too perfect, too still. From horizon to horizon, the sky shimmered faintly, a curvature that only revealed itself when sunlight struck at dawn or dusk. Airplanes passing through it reported no turbulence, yet their instruments flickered and reset mid-flight. GPS systems displayed locations thousands of miles apart simultaneously, as though the planet's surface were folding in on itself. And then came the confirmation. Spectroscopic scans from ground-based observatories matched the signature of the structure exactly to 3I Atlas. The same frequency, the same spectral fingerprints, the same pulse pattern, except this time the pulse came from everywhere. Earth was no longer outside the object, it was inside it. No one could agree on when the transition had occurred. Some theorized it had begun during the ninth-day resonance, others argued it happened the moment the afterglow disappeared. What mattered now was the reality before them. The planet had become part of an enclosed system, a bubble within an unknown field of geometry that extended beyond the atmosphere and into orbit. Telescopes aimed outward found nothing but distortion. Stars blurred into streaks, satellites vanished into static, and radio signals sent beyond the boundary never returned. The universe outside had gone silent. Inside, however, everything began to hum again. The faint tone that people once felt rather than heard returned. Deeper, more resonant, vibrating through metal, glass, and bone alike. It wasn't random, it carried modulation, the rhythm of intention. Engineers recorded it and discovered a pattern hidden within, 3 harmonic layers corresponding to the orbital frequencies of Earth, the Moon, and Mars. 3I Atlas hadn't trapped the planet, it had connected it. But connected to what, or to who, was the question no one could answer. Communications scientists attempted to respond. They encoded mathematical sequences into light pulses, broadcasting them through lasers, hoping to create resonance feedback. The field absorbed every signal without distortion, yet no reply ever came. It was like shouting into infinity and hearing only your own echo returned with perfect timing. And then, on the 4th day after the field's appearance, came the first visual anomaly. Night skies across multiple continents displayed faint, grid-like lines, geometric lattices moving just beneath the upper atmosphere. They weren't auroras or contrails, they were patterns of light bending around something invisible. Cameras failed to capture their full detail, but long-exposure photographs revealed their shape, hexagonal tiling stretching from pole to pole. To physicists, it looked eerily familiar, the same geometry found on 3I Atlas's surface before its transformation. The realization spread through the scientific community like static fire. The object hadn't simply enveloped the Earth, it was recreating its own structure around it, expanding the pattern cell by cell, molecule by molecule. The planet was becoming a living map of 3I Atlas itself, and then something even stranger happened. The sky began to respond to thought. People who stared at the horizon long enough reported seeing faint ripples spreading outward, as though the air itself were listening. Groups meditating together triggered localized distortions visible to satellites. Even emotional surges, grief, joy, fear, registered as measurable fluctuations in the field's resonance. It wasn't just reactive, it was interactive. 3I Atlas was now mirroring consciousness, shaping reality according to collective human focus. The line between observation and creation had dissolved. The Vatican released a rare statement calling it a test of perception. Quantum physicists called it feedback recursion. Others simply called it the merge, and with each passing hour it deepened. Rivers began to glow faintly at night, mirroring constellations that no longer existed. Mountain ranges hummed with subsonic frequencies tuned to planetary ley lines. Electrical storms formed with no heat, their lightning discharging into the upper atmosphere without thunder. Nature had become data, and data had become alive. In major cities, people started hearing voices not through ears, but through static, faint murmurs carried by lights, screens, and even reflections. The words were indecipherable, but the tone was unmistakably human. Some swore they heard their own names whispered back to them. Others reported conversations that seemed to anticipate their thoughts before they were spoken. It was as if reality itself had begun talking back. NASA's Emergency Task Force, renamed Project Penumbra, issued its final broadcast on the phenomenon. In carefully coded language, they confirmed what many already suspected. The field surrounding Earth wasn't random nor natural. It was evolving, adapting faster than human instruments could measure. Every attempt to model it mathematically ended in recursion loops, infinite calculations that collapsed back into themselves. Every equation is being rewritten, one physicist said before the feed cut to black. It's not expansion, it's translation. For the first time, humanity wasn't just observing a cosmic event, it was becoming one. Artists began to paint what they saw in dreams, vast crystalline structures woven through the clouds, luminous figures standing on horizons of light. Children described hearing a low hum in their sleep, the sound of the stars breathing. And beneath the wonder, fear took root again. Because if 3i Atlas was translating Earth into something new, no one could say what the final form would be, or whether life as it existed now could survive that transformation. Then came the phenomenon that ended all doubt. In the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a vortex appeared, not of water, but of light. Satellites captured the exact moment it formed, a perfect ring hundreds of kilometers wide, rotating counter to Earth's spin. It emitted no heat, no radiation, yet it drew the clouds around it into a spiral pattern visible from space. And at the center of that spiral, the same pulse returned. Every frequency, every harmonic, every signature, 3i Atlas had re-emerged, not as an object, but as a doorway. Whatever had once been distant was now here, opening from within. The countdown, it seemed, had only been the beginning. The spiral widened each hour, but not in distance, in definition. What began as a faint luminescent ring soon solidified into a structure of perfect geometry. Satellites captured its form, concentric layers rotating in opposite directions, each made of light, refracting through water vapor, yet leaving no shadow. Beneath it, the ocean calmed, unnaturally still, glass smooth, reflecting the sky like a second world inverted. Every ship within 1,000 kilometers lost power, compasses spun freely, radio signals fell silent, but the silence wasn't emptiness, it was dense, weighted, charged. Instruments that could still record data revealed something staggering. The center of the vortex had zero measurable distance. In simpler terms, it was infinite. Observers described the sensation of standing near it as both overwhelming and familiar. The air itself seemed to slow. Every heartbeat stretched, every sound bent inward. And though no voice emerged, everyone who saw it felt the same unmistakable impression: it's waiting. At first, humanity did what it always does. It tried to measure the unknown. Submersible drones were sent into the vortex, their cameras streaming live until, one by one, they vanished without impact or resistance. Each transmission ended with the same image, a flash of white light followed by a sudden glimpse of what looked like a horizon, bending upward. Theories multiplied. Some believed the structure was an Einstein-Rosen bridge, a wormhole connecting 2 points in space-time. Others insisted it was dimensional recursion, a fold within the quantum fabric of reality. But then came the finding that silenced debate. Every measurement taken from the vortex matched the harmonic pattern embedded in human brain activity since the 9th day event. The doorway wasn't connecting space, it was connecting mind. As researchers realized this, another phenomenon emerged. Dreams began to synchronize globally again, but this time they were not abstract. People reported standing at the edge of the vortex, gazing into a vast, mirrored void filled with their own reflections, each reflection whispering different outcomes. different futures. The collective subconscious of humanity was aligning with the doorway. And as always, when consciousness focuses, the universe responds. The vortex began to rise. Not physically, its visible structure remained in place, but its energy field extended upward, forming a vertical column stretching into the clouds. Airliners rerouted to avoid it. Their radar painted the column as solid, though no material presence could be detected. It was light behaving as matter, geometry replacing substance. Then, on the sixth night, something came through. Not a craft, not an object, a wave. It swept across the Pacific at the speed of thought, invisible to the eye, undetectable by radar, yet every human being on the planet felt it. Some described it as warmth, others as the echo of a memory they didn't know they had. The wave passed through everything, stone, water, skin, and left behind a single, measurable change. The resonance tone that had haunted humanity since the event shifted upward, climbing half a frequency step. For physicists, it was a nightmare. Every known physical constant, from Planck's length to the gravitational ratio, had changed by infinitesimal but universal amounts. The cosmos had been retuned, and that retuning wasn't random. It followed the precise mathematical curve of a Fibonacci sequence extending into infinity. The universe itself had adopted a new symmetry, one far too deliberate to be natural. Across the globe, old matter began to behave like new. Crystals formed in air, sand turned into glass overnight, clouds bent into right angles at sunrise. Animals migrated without reason, as if responding to a silent call. Plants grew in fractal spirals perfectly aligned with cosmic geometry. Even the human body began to respond. Heartbeats stabilized into exact rhythm with the planetary resonance. Brain activity synchronized during REM sleep. Across cities, strangers began sharing identical thoughts, finishing each other's sentences without prior communication. The planet was harmonizing, and no one could stop it. Meanwhile, the vortex brightened, and for the first time, something visible appeared inside. At the heart of the light, suspended as if above an invisible surface, hovered a single structure, a sphere made of interlocking triangles, shifting in pattern like liquid glass. It pulsed with colorless luminescence, cycling through frequencies faster than perception could follow. It wasn't floating on water, it was floating on reflection. When telescopes zoomed in, the impossible detail emerged. The triangles weren't solid, they were windows, and behind those windows lay vast vistas of starlight, galaxies seen from angles that should not exist. It was a model of the universe, not in miniature, but in truth, a pocket of space-time containing all of space-time, folded inside itself like a cosmic mirror. 3i Atlas hadn't built a portal, it had built a seed. That seed was now germinating inside the ocean, rewriting the geometry of existence from the quantum scale upward. Every particle of matter on Earth, every atom, every vibration was being synchronized to the same cosmic code. The transformation wasn't invasion, it was inheritance. And yet, the deeper meaning remained unclear. For days, nothing new occurred, only quiet observation, humanity holding its breath as instruments registered smaller and smaller oscillations, like the slow inhalation before a great exhale. Then, just as scientists prepared to launch an unmanned probe into the sphere, an unexpected transmission cut across every radio frequency on Earth. No voice, no message, just a single tone, pure, harmonic, and resonant with the core frequency of human consciousness. The tone lasted exactly 9 seconds, then silence, but that silence didn't stay empty for long. Within hours, the oceans began to glow faintly with pale light, not surface reflections, but illumination from within. Across the world, water shimmered with bioluminescent patterns forming spirals identical to those on 3i Atlas's surface before its transformation. Every coastline, every river, every drop of rain carried the same spectral signature. It was no longer possible to deny it. 3i Atlas was integrating the planet into its structure, atom by atom. And yet, the process caused no destruction, no chaos. Cities still stood, people still lived, but everything looked subtly different, sharper, quieter, more precise. Reality itself was becoming aware. No longer was the question what 3i Atlas wanted. The question was simpler, more profound. Had it always been here? Because as data analysts discovered, the field's harmonics matched frequencies buried deep in the cosmic microwave background, patterns older than stars, older than time. Whatever 3i Atlas was, it wasn't new, it was returning, and humanity, for reasons it couldn't yet fathom, was part of the design all along. In the weeks that followed, the distinction between the natural and the artificial simply disappeared. No explosions, no destruction, just a slow, measured quiet that grew heavier each day. The oceans glowed as though reflecting a light that wasn't there. Clouds lost their softness, forming perfect tessellations that stretched across continents. Mountains shifted minutely, not by tectonic force, but by geometry, aligning to invisible lines traced through the atmosphere. Even light itself began to change. At sunrise, shadows no longer stretched in straight paths. They curved, bending subtly toward the horizon, following arcs that defied geometry. Cameras recorded landscapes warping slightly around their lenses, as if every observer was now viewing the world from a different layer of space. For the first time, humanity began to understand that 3i Atlas wasn't expanding into Earth. Earth was expanding into it, and then came the realization that turned every observatory on the planet into a cathedral of disbelief. All across the world, telescopes and spectrographs detected identical anomalies in every direction, faint halos surrounding the stars, pulsing in rhythm with the resonance that had synchronized human hearts and clocks. These halos weren't optical illusions, they were micro-distortions, gravitational ripples converging on a single frequency. When mapped together, those ripples formed a lattice, a web stretching across the observable universe. Every node, every crossing point, every pulse, connected, the same pattern, repeating endlessly. It meant only one thing. 3i Atlas wasn't a visitor from somewhere else. It was part of a system, one of millions of identical nodes that formed the skeleton of the cosmos itself. It had not come into the solar system had always been inside it, and now, for the first time, it was waking up. At the edges of the Pacific vortex, the geometric sphere expanded, not by growing, but by multiplying, each facet folding outward into new configurations that shimmered with energy. Observers described it as watching reality bloom like a flower of light. The sea around it became motionless, reflecting not the sky above, but impossible constellations from places no telescope had ever charted. The object, or whatever it truly was, began projecting images, not messages, not symbols, but memories. Massive bursts of structured light formed holographic sequences visible for thousands of miles. They showed cosmic scenes, stars forming, planets shattering, civilizations rising and falling under alien suns. But there was one constant through every image, the presence of the same glowing lattice, the same geometry, the same pulse. Humanity saw its reflection in something timeless. Every frame of data broadcast across the world revealed that 3i Atlas had been observing life since before life existed. Its lattice appeared not only in the cosmos, but within cells, molecules, even DNA. The spiral of the double helix itself was an echo of the geometry now spreading across the sky. Life wasn't a coincidence. It was an expression of the same code, and now that code was rewriting itself. In laboratories, microscopic changes were recorded across every living organism. Neural patterns synchronized with harmonic frequencies, plants emitted measurable electromagnetic fields, and animals began exhibiting behavior that defied biology, whales singing in tones identical to planetary resonance, birds flying in perfect fractal spirals, coral reefs glowing in harmonic intervals. It was as if the biosphere itself had joined the chorus. Every night the sky grew brighter, not with stars but with structure. Vast arcs of faint light spread across the heavens, forming what looked like veins of living data running through space. Astronomers called it the veil. When viewed from space, Earth no longer looked like a blue planet. It shimmered with lattice lines glowing faintly through the oceans and land masses. Every continent now pulsed in sync, like a heartbeat. Humanity had officially become part of something incomprehensibly vast. But amid the awe, a question lingered. What happens next? The first sign came in the form of sound. Across the world, frequencies began to converge. The hum that once seemed faint and scattered now fused into a single tone, low, resonant, alive. It filled the atmosphere, vibrating through every molecule. It was not oppressive or violent, but ancient, familiar. People began to hear it in their dreams first, not as noise, but as a voice speaking through frequency itself. The words weren't clear, but their meaning was felt. a message beyond translation, yet understood instinctively. Do not resist. You are returning to origin. Then came the light. The sky darkened for exactly 7 minutes across the entire planet, every location, every time zone. During those minutes, no star was visible, no sun, no moon, just an endless blackness illuminated by shifting veins of golden light swirling like auroras. When the light returned, the world wasn't quite the same. Colours appeared deeper, gravity slightly weaker, the air shimmered with faint refractions like heat waves over a desert. But the most striking change was in the stars themselves. The constellations had shifted. They weren't random, they were aligned. From every vantage point on Earth, the stars now formed a single unified pattern, a spiral that matched the lattice seen in 3I Atlas's early imagery. The heavens had rearranged themselves to mirror the same geometry enveloping the planet. For days, scientists tried to rationalize it as atmospheric distortion, but as space telescopes confirmed, the shift wasn't optical, it was cosmological. The local curvature of space-time itself had changed. Earth was no longer orbiting the Sun was orbiting Earth. It was not dominance, not inversion, but synchronization. The entire solar system had folded into a higher dimensional geometry where orbits became harmonics and harmonics became structure. The universe wasn't being destroyed, it was being retuned into something coherent, something alive. In that moment, the true nature of 3I Atlas began to reveal itself. It wasn't an object, or a machine, or even an intelligence in the conventional sense. It was the architecture of reality, the self-correcting system that periodically rebalances the structure of existence when entropy threatens to dissolve it. What humanity had mistaken for invasion was simply maintenance. The lattice, the resonance, the synchronization, they weren't warnings. They were renewal. The event was neither the end nor a beginning. It was a reset, one that had occurred countless times before, across galaxies long since dissolved. And now, as the harmonics stabilized and the last traces of human fear faded into quiet acceptance, one truth became painfully clear. The cosmos was not indifferent. It was alive, and it had just opened its eyes again. For a long while, no one spoke. There were no alerts, no news conferences, no more updates from the agencies that once fought to explain the impossible. The data feeds had gone silent, but the world itself had become the message. Everywhere people looked up, and for the first time, what they saw wasn't the sky they'd grown up under. The heavens no longer stretched outward into infinite black. They folded inward, luminous and intricate, like a cathedral made of light. Stars pulsed in perfect rhythm, each one a note in a cosmic chord that echoed through air, through matter, through thought. The world was no longer orbiting anything. It was part of the song. Cities no longer felt separate from nature. Buildings glimmered faintly at night, their materials resonating with the same frequency that hummed beneath every living thing. Oceans glowed like veins carrying energy instead of reflection. The lines between technology and biology had dissolved. The planet itself had become a single living network, an organism of awareness, breathing in sync with the stars. And in that synchronization, fear finally ended. Humanity realized there had never been an arrival, because 3I Atlas was never a visitor. It had been here all along, dormant, hidden in the equations of gravity, the hum of atoms, the symmetry of DNA. Waiting for the right frequency, the right state of awareness, the right time for the system to remember itself. Now, it had. There were no more telescopes pointed outward, because outward no longer existed in any meaningful way. The cosmos had turned inside out, and what lay beyond was reflection. Infinite, recursive, alive. Each human being, each thought, each heartbeat was now part of something immeasurably larger. A consciousness not born of biology, but of the universe itself remembering what it was. No one could say what would come next, whether this state would hold, or whether the next phase would erase everything that came before. But for now, there was calm. The hum was steady. The stars, if they could still be called stars, glowed softly. And for the first time in human history, There was no distinction between observer and observed. It was all one. And in that unity, one last pulse echoed through the world, slow, gentle, deliberate. It was not a warning, it was acknowledgement, as if the cosmos itself had just whispered back, "You were never alone."